let's dive in. By finding the bridge for our first part of class here, we are going to be talking about how we might link up our recognition, awareness of the Penta, that is Rave, through a person who can communicate. So if the Rave is actually going to be able to emerge in the sense that it finds its life through viable, conscious Penta, that there is no way a human being, as we understand what a human being is in this day and age, is going to be able to communicate with them, according to Ra. So, kind of like, you know, how we have relationships with our animals. We have other species that we can have relationship to. When you have, oh God, I know this now. I have 5 animals at home. I don't know how that happened. Oops. But you have one animal, your relation to them is something, right? But then you add on other animals, there's a different dynamic. So the same kind of thing in the sense of understanding the other species that is not our own. We are a very different species as far as the tools and hardware from a Rave. But the way that there is a potential, according to Ra, to make a bridge between us and them is to educate people enough to where we can find someone who is willing to be that bridge. Now, Pentas follow alphas. Pentas follow alphas. Alphas are what makes the difference. This whole thing about what a Penta is going to express as an awareness. Remember, Pentas follow alphas. So this is what makes the Penta ultimately through a Wa, the alpha being able to guide the Wa, and then ultimately Wa's coming together to form gene pools, we finally have a capacity to maintain and grow as a species. Isn't that an interesting dynamic? So there's an OC16. Here's one Penta. You put 3 Pentas together, you get a OC16, an organized group of 10 to 16 people. But then you add them together and you get Wa mechanics. So Pentas follow alphas. Alphas are going to be in charge of controlling or dictating or managing or guiding Pentas. So Pentas accept the direction of alphas. Pretty clear, right? All right. So now human Pentas are guided by human alphas, as we've learned. Rave Pentas by Rave alphas. And a Rave alpha will not be able to guide or control a human Penta. That human Penta and Rave Penta are not going to mix. Just like the components don't mix, the Pentas don't mix. So then a Rave alpha will not be able to guide or control a human Penta. Human alpha could not guide or control the Rave Penta. So how are we going to have a happy medium? These special bridging ones who can communicate being human, they can communicate with the Rave Penta. And that is the right angle cross of laws. Any right angle cross of law born post 2027, and they have to be right, as in quad right. Okay, so that's the prerequisites in order that we find somebody who can act as a bridge between us and them. Right angle cross of laws, born 2027 and beyond, and a quad right. They are the only ones, according to Ra, who can act as a conduit through which the communication between human Penta and Rave Penta can actually take place. So if we think about a right-oriented cross of laws, let's say they're working in a hospital environment, they come into a room, there's a conscious Penta, okay, with a conscious Penta that as they come into the room as themselves, part of what is a human Penta, because that's going to be the only way to approach these creatures. So even if they are this kind of human, they won't be able to approach them singularly. Ra says it won't work as far as the communion with Penta. So it's Penta to Penta. The right angle cross of laws are the only translators that will exist. These are humans. This is a very special gift, Ra says, is going to be bestowed on them, very unique, because they're the only translators that will be capable of connecting a human Penta with a Rave Penta. And he says that he assumes that will give them a rather unique role in the future of whatever the relationship may be between our species and the one that emerges. So it really has to be right for them to do this work. If you think about, I was watching a show that was having at the very beginning 1617 or something like that, 1617, 1620, when Americas were colonized by the English, and the English learned, a few of them, not all of them obviously, learned Indian, and the translators were in control of how the conversation went, because there is no way to communicate except through a translator. So similarly, these are the people upon whom their shoulders rests the responsibility of being able to translate this information from human to Rave Penta and back again. Isn't that interesting? Okay, so that was it for Rave Cosmology. Now we're diving into the forking of the path and the witness generation. You'll see how this weaves in together. If you listen to the recording, Ra has a story there I'll let you listen to if it's right for you to do so. The witness generation now. Okay, so this was people who were born between September 17th, 2005 and January 30th, 2006. That's the witness generation. So this is the generation, Ra called them the forking of the past generation, because all of this is rooted in Saturn in 33 and Neptune in 13. That's that definition of this channel that brings us witnessing. So obviously the witness generation. Now, 13 is the fellowship of man, the gate of the listener. Universal ideas and values in an ordered framework which inspires humanistic cooperation. We know that the 13th is one of the rule gates. So Neptune, in the role of the self in interaction, receiving information from others, right? So what we remember, we can see in the 13. So open to listening, secrets, interaction. And be very careful with this keynote, but I find it fascinating that Ra labeled it also a gate of evil. What he means by evil is lack of empathy, because one of the things to recognize about the binary and everything in human design is that a gate that is specifically empathic can also be total lack of empathy, and he calls that horrifying. So you want to find somebody evil, someone who shows and express lack of empathy, their empathy being hidden, witness generation. So on the other side, we have the heaviness of Saturn. Saturn being about constraint, restraint, discipline, constriction, slows things down. So we have the 33, retreat, the gate of privacy, which reads active withdrawal and the transformation of a weak position into a strength, going through cycles of retreat and listening, part of the truth of this witness generation. So remember, this is a gate of revelation, the 33, right? When we have the whole channel, it's the identity, the higher self, being able to express its reflection, retreat, I remember, on an experience after it's come to completion and they've gained clarity. That's the prodigal, right? Design of a witness. So being retreat, this is an interesting gate because it's one of the 3 stop codons in our genetics, 56 and 12 being the other 2. So then we're seeing constriction, restraint around the closing of an experience, and then we have a potential for renewal. Once we've had our retreat, we've come to clarity, being able to share. Buck stops here, stop codon. So remembering what we need to take forward into the future based on what happened in the past. Another way you could say that. When we go through an abstract process, an experiential process, there's an opportunity when things are over and done with to retreat and reflect upon it. Reflect upon it, remembering, make a kind of sense of the direction that the path took us, because we're looking in retrospect. And then, once we've had the close of that cycle, move on. So, according to Ra, this channel of the prodigal, design of a witness, the last time this happened was approximately 5,000 years ago. And if we think back to what was happening around 5,000 years ago, Ra says that there was a genetic mutation that led to what we call writing. This is all part of that original mutated process. And isn't it interesting that nowadays, instead of writing on papyrus, we have our social media recollections. If it's up there on YouTube, it's immortalized. It's particularly when someone dies. There was not a professional, but a lay person who really dug deep into the materials of design. And I remember him criticizing me at one point, on my channel, which is why I knew who he was. And he's gone now because he hasn't posted in a year. His last recording was presumably on his deathbed in the hospital. That witnessing of the experience, once it's over, it's done. So the papyrus burning or molding, it's gone. But now, with our current generation, we get the opportunity to look into the past of people's human life experiences that they happened to share just because they happened to share. And when they're dead and gone, it won't get deleted. It stays up there. Isn't that interesting? Staying power. I think of Saturn with discipline. Yeah, restriction, constraint, but also discipline. Staying power, you know? So that little piece right there was my recognition. I don't know what Ra would think about that, but if we think about this witness generation, my daughter was born right after it, so she's got the 13, not the 33. But if you take a look at how they live their lives, they're sharing all of this information, sharing for sharing's sake, their secrets, or not, you know? It's a very long time ago that happened, and now we have a very different kind of process, genetically speaking, and how they're sharing all of this information, misinformation, because what gets put out on social media? Only the things people want you to see, right? You don't get to hear the whole story. That's why I don't like getting in the middle of confrontations or arguments when I'm only hearing one side, because that person's always going to lean it towards their side of the story. And so this mutated process of the larynx, 90,000 years ago, where we developed language, and then 5,000 years ago, here. The ability to enunciate with the sudden explosion of the Maya, development of self-reflected consciousness, and then ultimately, we concretized it into physical glyphs on the, capability of humans listening and telling the story and sharing the experience, this natural progression. It was initiated by Saturn and Neptune. And here we are again, 5,000 years later. And how is it showing up now? You can see, very different. Okay, so our mutative process of the larynx coming to an end with the witness generation, according to Ra. These are the people who are the bearers of that transition into the future. This generation embodies the Alpha and the Omega, according to Ra. So the witness generation dividing humanity into 2 different potentials. That's the incarnative process. If we look at them from the perspective of two different groups, born during that witness generation with that channel, we can take a look at the cross of Eden, right angle cross of Eden, and the right angle cross of service. They are going to lead down the two different paths that are opened up, because as we approach 2027, this generation, don't know how many of them are still alive, but this generation, there's a lot of them, here to bring two directional pieces. And if we just think about what we know of Eden and service, one's logical, one's abstract. Makes sense, hey? Collective, the generational themes, being collectively drawn towards the experience or the experiment. And how is that going to show up? Let's take a look at the 17th of September, 2005, when Saturn transitioned into the 33rd gate. Neptune was in the 13th gate for quite a while. Okay, so in that respect, we're going to start with the cross of Eden. Cross of Eden, this 36 and 6. Okay, as far as the witness generation is concerned. We're looking at Saturn in the 33rd gate, line 1. That is the marking or the demarcation of the point when the witness generation and cross of Eden group people were born. So here's the other arm of the cross, that 11 and 12. Remember the thing that mutated 90,000 years ago in order for us to develop language? And so Ra says the first thing that you'll look at when you see this right angle cross of Eden, born September 17th, 2005, that is the design of emotional manifestation, individual manifestation. But we know that this channel is the only channel that has the effect of changing the way the entire human collective knows itself or sees itself. And you can see that's a repeating pattern here, experiences itself. So this is what was incarnate at that moment, that child, an emotional manifester. And I keep getting repeated comments about people who are working with their younger generations. How many manifestors there are. I wish we had some real numbers. There's a lot more manifestors. I think it was something like, I need some help remembering exactly the percentage, you guys, from Ra's materials. He said something like 20-something% being manifestors. That's a big difference. That's a doubling of manifestors. And here we have a very special manifester, the first of the witness generation. During the consistency of that 1333 witnessing, there was a nodal shift. So two different nodal configurations during that generation. Here's one from 2148 and the other one, the 1817. And this shift happened on 28th of December in 2005, shifting over to the logic. And now this is the divider between those two groups as part of that witness generation. Since those nodes shifted into obviously they always start with the 6 because they move backwards, the 17 and 18. Until the end of the transit was while Saturn and Neptune created definition in that channel, the witness generation's cross of service group was born. And that was January 30th, 2006. You can see that it's a design of the split definition projector that is on this cross of service on that day. Split definition, basic split projector, starting off that generation as a theme. So that's the time frame for the witness generation. People born between September 17th, 2005 and January 30th, 2006. For the witness generation, this point that divides this generation into two groups, the cross of Eden group, the cross of service group, we had the nodal shift that we just discussed. Now we have charts to show the dynamic themes that are present within these people's lives who were born then. Okay, that shift happened again between the two generations, December 28th. Okay. The reason why this generation is so important is because these people are potential parents of Rave children. So you might have one of these as your children or a grandchild of yours. They are potential parents of Rave children. We're going to start with the Cross of Eden group. These are the people who kick us off this new experience. That makes sense, hey? Inexperience turning into experience. The bonding, mating that results in conception when we have the full channel there. So again, that full channel can come in through transit or another person in order to condition that person to have babies. This is a very important marker that can help us identify those who are fertile in the sense of carrying the mutation of the Rave. And that's why this information is here in this program for you, to help us identify the Rave children. Is the parent a Cross of Eden? Were they born during this time? And they are part of that witness generation, witness to the new mutation. Okay, these are highly fertile beings, potential for conditioning. If you think about the 3, remember what the 3 does relative to its bonding strategy? Mate with what is different. Yeah, open. Potentially, its mind thinking it's going to be promiscuous, its body going the distance with stamina, seducing people unconsciously. So, because they are mutative creatures, these people who were born during this time, September 17th through December 28th of 2005, that's a lot of individuals who have the potential to bring forth a mutation. And what this particular person is doing is manifesting emotional mutation in the world, spirit mutation, individual mutation into the world. When we look at the 3rd line, gate of conflict, friction makes babies, we see it's the fundamental design component of progress, the law that growth cannot exist without friction. So if we go into the line quality, 3rd line is called allegiance. It's the ability to secure support and create strength out of a weak position when connected to the harmonic gate 59, mating that results in conception. But the real theme is the destruction of old forms through union, either mundane, as shown above. Ooh, hang on, I went too quickly. Either mundane, as shown above, sexual union, or exalted is universalization. So not only the destruction of old forms through union, but when you're dealing with the 6th gate, you're also dealing with the kind of fertility that leads to unusual genetic mixes. Yeah, 3s, we bond with very different creatures. Yeah, one of the things that's very curious about this configuration, Ra says this is exactly what one would predict if you're going to have the coming of unusual genetic material, because we know that this is about mating, bonding in order to conceive. So, the depth of feelings that can enrich union and intimacy is on the elevation of that, the exaltation of that. On the flip side, what a 6-3 can show up like is the rejection of allegiance as submission to established order, sensitivity to controls which may eventually reject intimacy, bonds made and broken. So a fertile generation, Now, what we know about the 36, the darkening of the light, the gate of crisis, penetrating deeply into a new experience, strong sexual under or overtones. We can see the rule of cycles in which decline is a natural but not enduring stage. Yeah, what goes up must come down, cyclical in order to make it to progress. So if we look at the polarity of 6 in the 36, we can find that Earth in the line of transition, third lines, all in a line of transition. And this is the point at which decline has exhausted its power. So these people are born with the ability to establish a new order out of the ashes of the old. This generation had the decline exhaust its power. The language is right there. This is the decline, how it'll rise, and how interesting it is to have this language when we deal with the nature of the 55th gate and its mutation through the cross of the sleeping phoenix. Yeah? Establish new order out of the ashes of the old. So, you guys remember what was happening in 2005? What was happening there? Do you remember the ashes, things crumbling? So, the emotional depth to endure crisis and embrace change is what these creatures will have as their imprint. Now, the tendency and the detriment in withdrawal to try to assimilate the remains of the old order into the new, with the risk that it may rise against the new order once it has regained its strengths. So the embrace of change, but with feelings that will not let go of the past, is how that 36-3 shows up in the challenge state. Now, if we look on the body side, the form, stand still, the gate of caution, we have the quality of restraint and the importance of meditation and inaction in confronting temptation. So this biogenetic inheritance, the unconscious core expression of being. On one side, we have light is always conscious of darkness. This is the line of the pragmatist. Light is always conscious of darkness. The sun in that 12th gate. Caution as an expression of social experience. So unconsciously, what's practical for them is to be very cautious so that they can deal with the difficult social dynamic. What do we know about individuals? They're different. All individuality, very different. Different socially, being born with a difference socially. The 11, peace, the gate of ideas. We have a harmonic condition in the individual or society that permits assessment before renewed action. So we have the 11, 5 as philanthropist. That is what it reads there. The philanthropist is the 5th line. To be philanthropic with one's ideas. The motiveless nurturing of the disenfranchised to ensure harmony. So the most powerful activation of this beginning of this generation who are born under the cross of Eden, they are the ones who are going to have to look after the Rave children because they're the ones who are going to give birth to those Rave children. And the only way that these beings as parents, you can see they've got part of mating and part of preservation, custodianship. The only way that they're going to be able to recognize who the children are is that we have to inform them. They're manifested. Who's going to inform them if we don't? Otherwise, those disenfranchised will not achieve harmony. So according to Ra, it'll be a surface similarity to autism and the fear that rises within a parent, adrenalized fear, because that's a powerful fear, that there's something wrong with my child. What's wrong with my child? They'll be blinded into maybe taking the advice of the homogenized material world if they do not have access to this information. Which is why it's very important for us to be able to distinguish, in terms of grouping, parents of this, rave children. So being able to make an informative video or to speak specifically to the parents, potential parents of these children, now you know who to target. If it's right for you to do so, or who to keep an eye out for. If we look at the nodal shift here, the beginning of the nodal, before the shift actually. So biting through the gate of the hunter and huntress, the justified and necessary use of power in overcoming deliberate and persistent interference, the gate of control. This generation has objectivity as part of their north node, the way that they're designed to see. So then, this generation from a personality perspective is looking at the world in this way, being objective. That is their way. And how we see is that the use of force must be based on impartiality and not emotionally motivated. Built into this, there's also the drive for elimination that is so powerful that objectivity is related purely to cause and not effect. Subjectivity in this, rather than objectivity, can be devastating. So looking at the world in a way that there's enormous conflict in oneself and conflict in what you think you see, because remember, these are the parents, and what's actually there for them to see, they won't be able to see clearly unless they're informed that they are the bearers of the new generation, potentially rave children. Where they're going to be born, the beginning of their process, the nodes were in the gate of depth, the well. This is the necessary and qualitative foundation that is a prerequisite to establish the common good. Ra wants you to see that line of action. This is where my Pluto is, action. To see a world where action is simply necessary. Not only the action that is necessary, but an enormous need for protection that in times of social renewal is obsessed with the details of planning at the expense of action. So, in other words, he says that this is a generation that's going to have the potential of very fragile offspring that can be easily misdiagnosed and not understood. If we take a look here now at the Cross of Eden with that unconscious node, oh, would it be a shock to have one of these children born out of you? Remember the shift happening? One of the things I notice is that people are having children at older and older ages. Have you noticed? Waiting, for financial security or whatever it is to settle down, bond, and have children. And as we know, the older you have children, the more challenges show up. So initially they may be seeing that birth as a shock, right? But they're built to handle, they're in an environment being attuned to shock. So here comes the initiation, but also here comes the chaos. So in the arousing gate of shock, we're looking at the 6th line of separation. In times of crisis, when all those around are confused and in disorder, the ability not to succumb to the panic, but to have the will and vitality to survive it alone. We respond to disorder and shock through recognition and adaptation. 3rd line process here, adaptation. How do we transcend? Keep our objectivity. When you're looking at that, that is being able to handle the shock built into the process. On the other side, we see the gentle, the gate of intuitive clarity, the extraordinary power of clarity in the now, the awareness of now. And hang on, When you're looking at the 57.6, this is all about, quote, according to Ra, well, we're going to do the best that we can to try and figure out the best that we can do to protect our own, unquote. Okay, so to handle the shock that tomorrow brings, these are the people that are born to handle it. These are the people that will bring raves into this world. And they have to protect their children. This is a person who is manifested. They're not seeking out communal protection. This is an individual with the shock or a power to handle the shock and to go it alone, right, as their wisdom potential. So this is a generation that's bringing a very powerful rave mutation force into the world, and they have to protect it because in the beginning, it's extremely vulnerable. They're going to have to protect it, their children, from other people thinking that there's something wrong with them, wanting to do experiments on them, wanting to give them drugs, wanting to give them whatever the case. What do we do with these children? So these are our manifestor parents who are going to end up defending their children from other human beings, well-intentioned or not, because they don't know what's going on with the child. The parents are the ones who have to take responsibility for this, because remember, we're ending the age of planning. So the people outside of you are not going to be reliable or trustworthy when it comes to taking care of one's own. So it's not necessarily that the human beings are cruel or mean or whatever the case may be. It's just that the children won't be understood because they will be brand new. So these are the ones who are going into the experience of having these new rave babies. And this cross of Eden generation is going to be under enormous pressure if we take a look at what the keynoting of the open centers are. They may be enormously frightened because their child doesn't look normal. They will feel and make decisions from a sense of not being worthy, not feeling secure, and not knowing when enough is enough. Their fundamental drive to empower themselves as an individual, to start off a new journey, to be able to ensure the safety and security of their children. They will be having activations pointed towards protecting the young and family. Their fundamental drive to protect their children gives us hope for rave babies to survive. Manifestors, I got the image of the "we can do it," the women with their fist and the arm showing the strength. We can do it. As a parent, that fear being one of the things that you can help them get over, that is helpful for us to be able to not only make a good living at design, because resolving people's fears is one of the primary material receptivities we have here that is built into our genetics. Help people get over fear, help people feel better. Okay, that's part of the job of being an analyst or a teacher or a guide or whatever you want to call yourself. This cross of Eden with Saturn in the gate of retreat, gate of privacy. Remember, active withdrawal, transformation of a weak position into a strength. When we first come to this first line, it's avoidance. The actual keynoting of Saturn in that first line is avoidance. It's the voice of evidence speaking out of the throat, the wisdom in a weak position to recognize that survival demands complete withdrawal. That's the advice to this generation. What feels restrictive or constraining and yet is going to bring them the discipline to be able to get to the bottom of this experience and what it means, to be able to share as a witness to the new rave babies, because they're the ones who are going to see them first, the parents. So retreating when one realizes they are in a weak position. On the flip side, where courage is just plain foolishness, it's another thing that it is telling us about. 13 on the other side, remember, it's Neptune. We have the fellowship of man, gate of the listener, if we think about what Neptune brings to this universal ideas and values in its ordered framework, which inspires humanistic cooperation, the secrets hidden behind a veil, you can understand where avoidance comes from, because we have pessimism here. Pessimism is the third line quality, the belief that what is best can never be achieved. On one side, the lack of trust that can only be transformed through concrete evidence, or openness that is conditioned by suspicion and seeks evidence. Pessimism, exalted to an art form, whereas art, it may have the opposite effect. Satire is an example. Pessimism is an art. He says that to really understand this, there is both understanding that we're here, we're at the end of the line. This is the generation who is going to be born with that experience, recognition. This is the end of the line for humanity. Maybe not necessarily consciously, but that is what Saturn is doing. And we're looking at the realization that if you're not thinking about the negative, you're not really going to be able to make it through. Being realistic with facing what is. Yeah? Pessimism, natural layer of pessimism, is a protective mechanism so that we're not everything roses. Realists. That's what we threes are. Realists. Okay. In dealing with this 13.5 exalted, the unconscious Neptune in the 13th gate, 5th line, is called the Savior. So that Neptune exalted in the 5th line, the Savior. We're looking at the ability to overcome all obstacles for the betterment of humanity. The charismatic genius who can find a role for everyone. The listener that has a gift for finding a role for others. That's the real key here. These parents born with the Savior aspect to them. That's so important because this generation is the one that's going to have to see the secret that's been born to them and save their children. It's part of their spiritual mission. They're going to have to put up quite a fight, a battle, in order to save these children, in order to be an advocate for these children and not let it get taken away and experimented on. So if we look at the profile 3-5, trial and error business, we know them to be great social scientists. Yeah, stand up, say something, take the heat when something's not working, break the bond with what doesn't work, and universalize a new heresy. Or bring a new solution. Be the savior. Be the saint. Go the distance. Stamina. 5th line bodies. We have stamina. It can be so difficult, though, being a 3-5, because everything that your mind makes a decision about, you see the flaw in it, even if it was a correct mistake. You live with the pessimism of it and the blame that ensues. So, by empowering a 3-5, you do a great service to the world, because these are really good people to have on your side in a fight. You know, okay, that didn't work, let's try something else. Okay, that didn't work, let's stop that, let's try something new. And this is an emotional manifesting body graph. That means you're looking at a great deal of anger, railing at fate, or not, you know. They're going to be angry because whether they are aware of it or not, whether they're educated in design or not, they're going to be angry at the hand fate appears to have dealt them. You know, is it in the cards for you to have a healthy baby? At this juncture, with the way that our society is expressing genetically, we can see all kinds of issues. And the older you get, the more you're fearful and scared because of all the things that they warn you about. So if it's right for you, if you feel called, if you can reach these ones, inform them. Yeah, keep them informed. Not all of these people will have Rave babies, do recall that. They're potential carriers of the mutation. So don't forget that fact. Potential carriers, quad right. Remember, born out of quad right. The channel of curiosity up here is unconscious. It's the design of a seeker or a searcher. They're going to have to, and they're going to be genetically imprinted to, seek out the truth. But there's no truth in the now. The potential of what a rave baby is and what it could become is something that will be unfolded over time, because obviously everybody has their maturing process and they will not be correctly assessed for their fullest experience of what they came here to be individually, because they will appear fragile, not human. These are people with this 2212 channel of openness, design of a social or antisocial being. These are people who have the power, when they're emotionally clear, especially, to inform, to impact, and that information that they put out into the world mutates others acoustically. Have you ever listened to Ra and felt like your cells were changing? It might be my vivid imagination. But feeling the sense of the attunement to a different frequency change you cellularly. That's what this 12 can do. It's very important for them, these people, Cross of Eden, Witness Generation, Channel of Openness, Design of a Social or Antisocial Being, not to communicate necessarily with the collective, although they have that after the experience, after the clarity, that potential to tell the story of their children. But it's important for them to have personal communion and be passionate about being a parent and be informed about these rave children and their potential, so that they are empowered to protect them despite the fear. So many of these fear factors that are part of the protection mechanism, when they're clear about what to do about it. These are our doers, obviously. Manifested people, initiators, informing, keeping us informed. We've got to inform them. How are they going to know otherwise? So if we take a look at the collective logic, we see no defined channels here. Even though the logic of things might intrigue them, this Cross of Eden group can only be touched through their feelings. So, spirit people. Hey, Natalie, spirit people informing them. Who's going to keep the manifested populace informed? Obviously, most logically, it's our manifestors who can really have that power, especially a 5-1 manifester, putting it out into the world. We need this. They can only be touched through their feelings. Who's going to help them find spirit? Only through their feelings, their emotional expression, will they be able to grasp at some level what's really going on, according to Ra, and it's unconscious, the expression of the voice, and it can only be clear over time. So in an empowered state, that passion coming through for the love of the children, or not. Remember, there's always an or not. We're more likely to help them find the love if we inform them of what's really going on with their children. Only through their feelings will they be able to grasp what's going on. So this is the beginning of looking and seeing where we can find keys in their body graph. This is them. Where we can find a methodology in understanding this is a broader marker of what this part of the generation looks like, this group, this first group that's being born, yeah? It gives us valuable keys in understanding both what they are going to require or need in their process in terms of information. They need this information from those like us who have the knowledge and can really help benefit them. They need us. Otherwise, who's going to do it? Who's going to help them, inform them? These potential parents of the first rave generation, the rave children, their highly fertile ability to carry a mutated process. See, here's the keynotes to help read the charts of these children who are going to bear those children. They're still children now, right? If they're born in 2005, still under 30. after 2027, you know, being able to help reach them. Maybe you do it before, who knows what's correct for you. They have the ability to establish order out of the ashes of the old. This is their genetic potential. To carry that mutative process, to manifest emotional mutation into the world because they carry that channel. Remember, 1222. They are the carriers of the energy out of which the rave can emerge, the light that will be conscious of the darkness of others, unconscious core essence, their radiance, practical capability to be cautious and to have the light that will be conscious of the darkness of others. Powerful empowerment. They are going to have to be very cautious because of the social dynamic for them being very difficult, because this is what they are seeing. Broadcasting in empowerment. 11.5, they have to protect their disenfranchised children. So, those rave babies being disenfranchised in the human world, the parents will have to protect them. That is the philanthropist, not just their own. If they're collective, the chart of the person who was born first, we can see that 2 parts collective and abstract, so sharing the experience, creating, let's say, a place for people to discuss, most likely online at first, discuss their children. They're going to see how action must be based on impartiality and not emotionally motivated. The shock of initiation in the environment will require separation, where they will have to do their best to protect their children, their rave children, especially because those are the ones who will be, seem to be feeble and weak, fragile, frail on their own. Avoidance and withdrawal because of the pessimism. Remember, my child will never be able to. My mind is imagining what they might say. My child will never be able to, blah, 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 blah. Have children. Live on their own. Go to college. I'll never see them get married. You know, that kind of pain, suffering, of seeing your dreams dashed. Because when you have a child, you imagine all of these things. Seeing them hold their first baby. These will not have babies, the raves, according to Ra. These are people who are going to have to be the savior to their children. It's in the cards for them. Their spiritual purpose. Break the bond with what doesn't work in the past. Carry this information forward. If it's right for you to do so. So, in order for them, these parents, to recognize that their children are a different species, because they're manifested, they have to be informed. And they will be, again, under enormous pressure, recall. We're going to go into the cross of service next, but we have some notes here that Katja is giving us as a synopsis. So under enormous pressure, enormously frightened because their child doesn't appear to be normal, a sense of not being worthy and not feeling secure, that 3-5 profile being born, which speaks about tremendous potential, but it's not going to be an easy road, 3-5s, anger, lots of anger. Keep them informed. So if you have a child that can't blah, 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 what are you going to do? Are you going to put it out there through your networks? Are you going to tell people one person at a time? Are you going to tell them that you, Cross of Eden, witness generation, born between this date and this date, is your birthday? This day, this date to this date. Then you might. Are you able to do that? Is it right for you to do that? I don't know. Don't just do it because I'm pulling out calls. I'm not specifically talking to anybody. I'm just sharing what I recognize. They need to be told that this is the mutation that's taking place and that they are likely to be a potential carrier, not to scare them, but to make them aware, to help them know. We know that that's part of knowing. Empower them so that they recognize the value in their child rather than having their hopes and dreams of having a normal family life dashed. set up expectations, to let go of expectations of what their child could be. There's a way of saying it. These are beings that are going to have to seek out the truth. They're going to have to be passionate about what they're doing. And even though the logic might intrigue them, they are the witness generation of the experience, and they can only be touched through their feelings, and then they can grasp what's going on. Okay, wow. Great job, Katja. I've been going slow to make sure I don't miss anything. So we're going a little bit longer today. We're going into the cross of service now. These people who were born after December 28th, 2005, because that's the end of the, Saturn-Neptune transit. We have the January 28th, 2006 relates to the cross of service group of the witness generation. Okay, January 28th is when it happened. Happened. The witness generation, all of them, both groups, all of them born here during this generation with the witness channel, all of them will have problems with fertility, but it's more so for the cross of service group because, see, they don't have the fertility here. You see that? They don't have the same kind of sexual drive nor fertility. It doesn't mean that all of these cross of service generation, witness generation people are going to be infertile. It will also depend on their partners. What if that partner has a whole channel? But they may end up having to deal with artificial or scientific ways of manipulating the fertility process. This is the generation that marks the beginning of the end of human fertility, according to Ra, that cross of service witness generation. Now, this is the group that's going to be most open to knowledge. See the logic? They want to know. They are knowers, unconscious knowers with this definition. So mentally defined and complex. Their purpose for right angle cross, yes, to be of service, but also how to support their well-being, survival, movement forward into the future. Their whole purpose, quote Ra, their whole purpose is toward their own survival and fulfillment. Witness generation. Have you noticed that the children seem to be a lot more self-centered nowadays, or is it just me? Self-focused, self-absorbed. Okay, it began here. The mutation into a new form. They will understand at a deep genetic level that they're completing the decline that is being transformed on the other path through mutation into a new form. So Julie's saying absolutely. Yeah. I mean, goodness, the narcissism. But it's part of their generation. It's just the thematic. Look at how many of them are creating and want to be YouTube famous or Instagram famous or TikTok famous, and that being their job. Okay, so this mutation into a new form, the decline of the human species, the cross of service. Now we're going to look at a generational theme for this group, taking this snapshot of this fork of the path into the cross of service. This is a 3-6 projected, not manifested 3-5. So these are the people who are going to study and need to master in order to figure things out. Ross says that it's essential for the parents of these children to know that they have to be invited. So if you're a parent to one of these kids, invite them, recognize them, affirm them, help them find their way through the trial and error. Remember, first 30 years of their life, 3-3. I always remember when I see 3-6 or 6-3, Ross saying that he would congratulate these profiles when they get to their 30th birthday. Congratulations, you made it. Because a lot of times it's a very difficult life. They may not. Remember, 30 is the end of childhood. So these children, if we think about what the 6th line quality is, do you remember what the 6th line quality is? as far as its capacity of being spoiled. 18.6, 17.6, spoiled, nurtured through spoiling them, spoiling this witness generation, recognizing them, giving them their education, because education is critical for a projector, allowing them to be lazy if that's how it looks, letting them study, letting them master, letting them be with whoever they want to be, and be whomever they want to be, whatever's correct for them, spontaneously. Then you're going to allow them to have a breakthrough. Because remember, sudden breakthroughs of unique, individual, different insights. Genius or freak, unconscious. And it's always interesting when that genius, freak, or any of the opposition channels show up not in sun, earth, or nodes. It's a very different experience to come across those beings because it's less common, right? As far as those channels go. Commonly, we'll see them in oppositions, so sun, earth, or nodes. You can see that's not the case here. Very different life for them to pursue. So we'll begin with the joyous, the gate of vitality, stimulation being a key to joy. If we look at the personality sun, this 58, or 58, there we go, 3 line of electricity. This is all about your own energy, right? Vitality, the energy to fuel independent stimulation. We're entering into a global cycle that demands the ability to operate independently. What's given us our independency? Electricity, social media. I can work from home. Isn't that nice? To share my vitality with others, to look after oneself independently is part of this person's description of their core awareness in order that their life purpose is fulfilled. Remember where the 58 is? Oh God, where is it? 58, transformation, winter. Yeah, mutation. Okay. Think about the difference now between emotional versus splenic, manifested versus projector. Cool, right? Eden, starting off something new. Look at that start right there. Afraid of all of these things, whereas this generation, no, not afraid. Or they do have fears, but their fears resolve through being their own authority, you could say. Very powerful spleen, 2 motor functions. So fear not being a problem, they can spontaneously be able to handle whatever comes their way. They're going to have a gift for survival, in other words, the transmission and the recognition of what is going to help them, the logical patterns that will help them survive. Because they have this stimulation in the now, they need to be invited to know these things about themselves. Go with your spontaneous pattern recognition. What's tasteful for you? What is present to your instincts with your awareness now, here, now. Stay in the now, live in the now. Oh, over here, no truth in the now. So this marker is a very strong immune system. The immune system carrying the dynamic to the end, but it's not fertile, not reproductively fertile like this one is. See the difference? Huge difference, yeah? Keeping still, the grounding of that vitality is in the gate of stillness mountain, where we have temporary and self-imposed inaction. Why? For the benefit of assessment, to know when to focus, concentrate on something. Spontaneous. Third line here is about controls. That's where their earth is going to be. Their grounding, what's grounding for them? Controls. The ability, by its very nature, to understand restraint and the potential in acceptance, to use the period, stillness, to redefine strategies. Logic is very strategic. We see a logic client being born, or parent, or whomever being born. It's on the other side, the energy of acceptance, for acceptance in action, The energy for acceptance in inaction. Okay. A deep dissatisfaction with controls. And so it's all about realizing that there's nothing one can do. You can't do anything about the control mechanisms that we are under in our society. Let's say if we're in China and we're only allowed to have one child, what are you going to do? I don't know what it's like, but what are you going to do when you're only allowed to have one child? So if we map this over to infertility, what do you do if you really can't have a child? There are some technologies, there are some techniques, but your genetic nature of not being able to reproduce. Ra would say that projectors are not here to leave a lot of genetic material behind. This one, you especially see the drive for that kind of reproductivity not being there. So when you're confronted with the reality that you are infertile, acceptance is grounding for them. My womb is still. We're at the end of something here, and these are the people who will experience it. Retreat, that Saturn, gate of privacy, it's going to be in the third line of spirit. Remember, active withdrawal and a weak position into a strength for the 33. Third line here is spirit. So this is a bridge burner. Break the bond, walk away. Somebody who can cut off relationships often abruptly, and it's going to be one of the most dynamic themes in them. Sudden breaking of the bond, the bridge burner. A drive for privacy that will cut off its relationships often abruptly. If we connect that with the third line of pessimism, now see we have a fully resonant outer planet channel being coupled with Neptune and its line of pessimism. So we have a narrowing of one's social dimension here. Break the bond, walk away. It's a significant aspect of these service people. Break the bond, walk away. It might seem cold-hearted. It might seem cruel. We're looking at a 3-6. So the 6 is going to have its tripartite life process. It's 3 phases. The generation that's going to go through the phases, never going to escape the fact that their whole lives are trial and error, because the trial and error doesn't end, never ends for a 3-6. This underlying theme of being able to be a role model if one lives healthfully to one's 50s. The quantum of observer observed, being an underlying theme of all of this, from experience, and authority on the experience, because they are a witness to it. These people who are a witness to not being able to have their own children. When you're looking at this personality, on the personality side, we've got third line Sun, Earth, third line Saturn, Neptune, 6 line nodes, so the first 30 years, third line. Then you're looking at, Ross says, incredibly destabilizing. If we think about what the 3 is, it's a testing ground, but it's beautiful. The real trial and error process can be, what did you learn? You have to discover by going through the experience yourself. So what did you learn? Tell us the story. What do you remember? This generation is going to have to deal without children. Will they even miss it? Will they care? What if they don't really want children? Will it be a problem? What if it's the parents going, when are you going to give me a grandbaby? Help the grandparents not put so much pressure on these infertile projectors. Will it even matter? I don't know. I don't know a cross of service with this at an age where they want to have children. Younger nowadays, it doesn't seem that they're really driven to want to have children, huh? So their generation finding logical satisfaction in correction to be successful in their service. They're looking for the sweetness of being of service to propagandize and transmit their recognition of what could be corrected. Not as mystical, you know, we've only got one mystical activation here with that 37 in the mystical way. They have a potential for a very cold, logical, just the facts, ma'am, truth, but also from the experience, the trial and error. For them to fulfill their promise of understanding what their contribution is, their service is to the collective. This is a purely collective cross. And why? Something that they're open to, being aware of. Why? Why is this happening? Why me? Why here? Why now? Particularly why now? You know? Poor me, why me is how the 3 shows up in authenticity. Being able to take the heat because you pick yourself back up again and you're willing to break the bond and walk away and start again, or being still, accepting the controls in an action, waiting for right timing to bond. We have a basic split here. So collaborative with others. I remember being soothed by or comforted by somewhere Ra saying about how parents, projectors are here to reparent humanity, not necessarily give birth to a whole passel of children. Oh, that just sounds exhausting to me. All right. How am I doing on time here? A little bit more. Fellowship of man, the gate of the listener. We have now Neptune in the line of bigotry. Okay? So, Neptune in the line of bigotry. The risk always present that fellowship can only exist for a particular type, whether racial, religious, national, or intellectual. So one of the difficulties with this generation is that their unconscious Neptune has a narrowness to it. Only these are the people that I want to share with. So it's not to be understood in the way that we appreciate the right angle cross of service as a collective service in its embodiment according to Ra. The way that it's generally described is collective service. But here, because we have bigotry here, unconscious spiritual awakening, their service is limited. It's bigoted. It's service to a very particular type. Their type, I imagine. So whenever you see a split definition, what's the easiest aspects to join the split become the deepest search of the being that has a split definition. Whatever's the easiest, whatever's the quickest, whatever's the fastest. And we can see both of these are potential. Okay? So when you're looking at this split, you'll notice the 1, 2, 3, 4 different ways a single activation creates this split to be temporarily linked together. So that's what they're going to be looking for. Sorry, cat on the desk. We have the 45th gate, so this is a generation that is going to struggle on the material plane because that's the thing that's missing there. And if they make decisions in order to own things, obviously they're going to have some adrenalized bitterness, resentment. Why can't I own that too? The 16, what we're looking at is looking for skills, hunting for the skills, according to Ra. And that's going to end up being wrapped up in their tribal necessity for material, because the energy, where does it want to go? Have more, own more, through skills. And their mind is going to look for this 10th gate too. Try to figure out how to behave in order to survive in this changing world. And if they're using their mind to use those processes for decision making instead of their way, they're lost. That 20th gate is also going to be something that they're looking for to get rid of the fear of tomorrow, trying to contemplate the now, trying to manifest now. This is very powerfully trying to be manifested, but we know it's not a manifestor aura, so it can never be. It can only be false, super slave, and incredibly adrenalized bitterness, resentment, resentful, because they cannot manifest their transmission, or what they desire, want, need, whatever the case in the world. So they are going to have an avoidance of confrontation and truth. The imperative is you've got a whole generation who wants to avoid confrontation, and so they're going to avoid truth, potentially, through not knowing what is inspiring and not knowing when enough is enough. So if we were to keynote this cross of service witness generation dealing with infertility, their core essence of awareness has the energy to fuel independent stimulation. And what's grounding for them is that there's nothing one can do about infertility. Realizing it is what it is. Third line. Realistic. Now, they need to be spoiled. If we're going to be raising these children, they need to be invited into a deep understanding of what that a deep understanding of what it is to be, not that, what it is to be. And then we have Saturn in that 33-3, cutting off relationships, often abruptly, natural, normal, as long as it's healthy. Points out the specific narrowing of the social dimension, because we also have pessimism here. Pessimism about sharing with others. The secrets, the stories. Their service is deeply limited because they've got Neptune in the line of the bigot. So their spiritual and service dimension limited, a personal process, their own process. This is a generation that is the most open to the knowledge of human design. Why? Projector. Have you ever met a projector who really recognized what human design could do? That wasn't just like, wow, who really recognized it, yeah? Projector who recognizes design, they're usually quite good at it. These are the knowers who are going to want to know, that cross of service group with a strong immune system, but not fertile, going through their 6 phases in life as a 6-line profile, never escaping that trial and error process, being a 3. So trial and error on the conscious personality is going to be related to their infertility and what to do with that. They're going to propagandize and transmit their recognition of what could be corrected in our society. They're collective beings, after all. They have a deep potential, just like all projectors do, but they're going to need guidance. Why? Basic split, collaborative, know thyself, know the other.